Okay, so we are at the Dundee engine plant in Michigan, and we're gonna go see what Chris is up to over here on this Trane 100-ton unit. Hey Chris, what are you doing?
Hey Jen. So we're up here in Michigan, and we were called up here by a customer to come up and take a look at some of the equipment they have and kind of teach their people on it. So when we originally came up, we kind of do what we always do. We bring our normal basics, back to the basics type of program. And they had sent us documents on what they have. And basically they have a whole bunch of these 100-ton Trane units like you see behind me. You can see here we've got the control panel. What we're finding on these units is that they're 20 years old. So the facility here just kind of took over these units. So they're kind of new coming into these old units. And we're finding a ton of little problems that have kind of all added up to be a lot of big problems. Anybody that ever takes a basics training with me, fundamentals, one thing we're always talking about is what are the normals. So when you walk up to a unit like this, first thing you see is this giant unit with lots of electrical, lots of controls. One of the first things you got to ask yourself, what would be normal about this piece of equipment? Once I know what's normal, I can quickly see this is no different than basically a window unit or a home unit. It's just bigger with more complexities. But if we take the same basic refrigeration cycle that we teach and we look into here, we can apply the same thing. If you just for a second think about controls, the things that turn these units on, well, that's it. That's the controls, that's the contactors, that's the thermostat that turns it on. It's just more of them, a little overwhelming, a little more complex. You still got a transformer up here. It's the same stuff, more of it, bigger. So all you have to know is what's normal about these controls. How does it stage them on? How fast between the stages? Things like that. As we go around the side over here, we can see the condensing unit. So right here, this first half is the condensing unit. Well, this is a 100-ton condenser that originally was R22 being converted to 407. You're looking at two circuits. You've got the circuit here, which has 6 fan motors on the top, and then we'll see on the other side 4 compressors. You've got the circuit over there, which also has 6 fan motors and 4 compressors. We've got suction line filter dryers. On the room over here, we'll see we've got liquid line filter dryers. These units also have what they call hot gas bypass. They've got a myriad of cutouts, pressure reliefs, and check valves, and all these other things that have been added into it for this particular application. Just walk around the side, I'll show you the compressor side. So on this side here, we can see the circuit 1 and the circuit 2. These compressors, we've actually labeled these. So when this unit kicks on, it actually has 6 stages. It's gonna kick on these compressors in stages, right? And once they're completely loaded up, well, all 6 stages are loaded, but it's exactly the same as any other refrigeration cycle. I mean, literally, if I hold a window unit in my hand and I show you we're absorbing heat here, we're rejecting heat here, we're gonna have a coil, we're gonna have another coil, we're gonna have a compressor, we're gonna have a metering device. Well, we've got our coil here, we've got a coil in the evaporator section, we've got our compressors, and we've got metering devices that I'll show you when we walk back around. Farther down there in that big white box, that's the evaporator, right? So that's where the evaporator coil is. That's where the fan is. If we go around, I can show you inside of that. You know, the key to all this equipment is just kind of taking the time to look over the manual, see how it was set up. If there's any notes in the manual, you're going to read it and see what was the intended purpose. If it's a pressure relief device, what was the pressure it's supposed to relief at? If it was a safety device, when does it go off? When does it trip? You got to know all those things, and it's usually in the manual. So the first doors here we're going to open up. This is just the disconnect electrical compartment for the air handler. It does have sight glasses up at the top. You can kind of see we've got them marked with red and yellow tags because we want to make sure that we can see which circuit is which. Over here on this side here, you can actually see the liquid line dryers and then some isolation valves that go to them. So actually, These are core dryers. These are removable, replaceable cores. So in our smaller equipment, we're used to cutting out or desoldering the dryers and putting new ones in. In this case here, we just isolate them, unbolt the cap, take the cores out, put new ones in. Very simple to do. We'll move down a little bit into the next section. Now in this section here, off to the side, you can see the blower. So we have the blower in here. It's actually a big blower with 25 horsepower motor on it. The refrigeration side of the evaporator coil is right here. This is the part where we see liquid line solenoids, right? Then we've got expansion valves. We've actually got 4 expansion valves per circuit. It doesn't matter if it's 1 or 4, they do the exact same thing. So we've got both circuits here, solenoid valves on the circuit. We'll move down another section and we can get into the filter section, which is also where the main coil is. I'll step up in here. In this section here, this is basically the return air plenum. If I was to open up one of these filters, the evaporator coil is on that side of the filters. We can see it. It's easy to get in here and keep it clean. This is absolutely no different. Now, we do have some options here where we can bring fresh air in from the outside. This unit actually has a big gas furnace right here that actually blows the fire in this plenum. There's no heat exchanger. This is the fire right here. The grating on the floor that you're seeing now, all down in here, this is coming from the building down below. We have the option on this machine. This is actually considered a variable air volume machine, not by slowing down the fan, but by limiting the amount of air that can come through these dampers. So we have the choice of bringing the fresh air or the air from the building and recirculating it, or we can bring it from the building and open up outside dampers and bring air in from the outside. So we have a lot of control over what we can do with this machine. And then if we move down to the final section, we can see where the gas furnace part of the control part of the gas furnace would be, which is a little more substantial than you would look at in most smaller units, but basically it's just a burner, right? So you got the safeties, you got the valves, you got the damper controls, but what you really get when all those things are working is you just get a big roaring fire inside that heats the air. So to kind of like summarize this all up, what I want you to look at is just think about, no matter how big this equipment is, it's the same cycle, it's the same controls. You got small things operating big things. You might have more of them or bigger things, but if you understand the basics, you can apply the basics to this kind of machine once you know the normals.
Thanks, Chris.